We're joined by Serj Tankian, lead singer, System of a Down. You know, first off, Serge, we have to say, Ben and I collectively, truth to power, job well done. What an amazing documentary.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You know, this is really a film about you, System of a Down, and the domino effect of your political influence.
Right. I mean, you know, the idea was to make it an activist journey, the film, not so much about an artist or behind the scenes, which obviously there's plenty of, but it's more of an activist journey and how that message gets, you know, portrayed from when the voice is really small to when the band blows up and then the voice gets bigger and bigger, both the positive aspects of it as well as the repercussions of being an activist within the music world.
Well, it seemed like early on, at least with the band, there was a struggle. Are we making music or are we making a political statement?
Yeah, there's always a yin and yang. I think that's what makes our music really interesting. A lot of bands, when they cooperate, it's not everyone on the same page. There's always push and pull. And I think that's what makes the music interesting and diverse.
You know, because of your political involvement, because of your activism, you've taken on a greater responsibility than most musicians. Do you carry the weight of that burden? I mean, is it a burden? Is the blessing the burden? Is it welcomed?
I've never looked at it as responsibility at all, to be honest. I was an activist before becoming an artist. So when I do speak through music, and I don't just speak, you know, socio-political things through music. There's a lot of other stuff. Obviously, most of my music's not political. But when I do, it's a natural thing just because I'm an activist and you know, and an artist at the same time. And they shouldn't have to we shouldn't have to question whether they should be combined or be separate. I think that's ridiculous.
A lot of the time, those types of things go together, right?
Yep.
You don't have to separate them out. I mean, you are what you are. You have, you believe what you believe. You've come from where you've come from. You know what you know, and that's going to manifest in whatever you do. Anyway, it's going to come out. What's in comes out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to always be political, but yeah, I think what Doug's trying to say is you kind of, I mean, I watched it in the documentary where you had the truth serum, you know, and it's coming out, and the band's trying to deal with that, and that's natural, you know. Every band has to deal. I mean, you know, when John Lennon brought out the Naked cover with Yoko, Ringo had to answer for it, you know, and so he called John up and he goes, "Hey, man, whenever one of us does something, every one of us has to answer for it publicly, right?" And he's like, "Well, Ring, you only have to answer the phone, you know."
Yes, I'll be there.
Yeah,
Pete's gone. Come, Ringo.
Let's go.
But we you know, yes, you're distancing yourself from the political aspect of it, but the documentary really focuses on, you know, you had a major part in helping the people bring down the Armenian government.
I don't know if I would say that. I think, look, as artists, we do what we do, you know, and you know, sometimes when there's not enough voices and one small voice is amplified, you know, and I've always cared about justice, whether it's in the US, whether it's in, you know, any part of the world. When I see injustice occurring and people suffering, it kind of makes me speak out, and not just through music, but also, you know, through letters. Like former President Serj Tankian, when he took power when he got reelected in 2013, I wrote in public letters, like open letters, basically kind of saying how, you know, basically questioning the results and all of that. And I think people appreciate that, because most artists don't really put themselves out there politically, because they lose a lot of fans, you know. You're taking a side. But my side has always been the side of justice. And if I lose them, I lose them. So be it.
Yeah. It was nice to see, you know, in the documentary, the band sort of saying, "Hey, what are you doing speaking out about this stuff?" But like further on in the documentary, without like letting too much go. But yeah, seeing the band come together and saying, you know, this is what we've been created for. And the guitarist saying, you know, "I'm honored to be here." And it's like they've transitioned with you to that point where you kind of realize, hey, something's bigger than us here, and we've been caught up in it. And here we are.
That's really correct, Ben. I think that's how it felt, especially in 2015 when the band played the show in Yerevan, Armenia at the 100th year anniversary of the genocide. I think we felt like that's what we were created for. And everything, all the diversities of the band, our message differentials all came together because our people needed us. And the same with the two songs that we just recently released for the people of Artsakh, and all of the, horrible humanitarian catastrophe that occurred during and after the war, after the onslaught by Azerbaijan and Turkey and Syrian mercenaries in Nagorno-Karabakh. A lot of people were killed and a lot of people were displaced. So we're doing our best to help spread the message and also raise funds, to get much needed prosthetics for young 19, 20-year-old soldiers that lost their limbs from drone attacks and stuff like that. So I think, for me, it's important to have the messaging kind of converge when we're doing stuff with the band. And I'm really proud that we were able to do that.
Do you think that 2015 concert had a profound impact on the events to come?
People say it has. It's hard for me to judge it, as an activist, you don't look for results, you just do the work and walk away, right? So
Yeah.
I think people have said that, the current prime minister said he was at that show with his wife and that he felt like if we can get 50,000 people there, then, the revolution should be able to get more than 50,000 people there. I think that was a huge statement,
He was right.
Yeah.
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 Now that was jaw dropping. Like even hearing you say that, where he was at the table and he said, we were there, and that gave hope to, if you can draw that many people. I mean, that was unbelievable. There was also another little segment in the documentary where I think it's a priest who said a quote, and he said, ignoring evil of genocide is kind of like leaving an open wound to bleed out. It just gets worse and worse. It doesn't matter if it's 1915 to now. If you leave it, it's just letting it bleed out and fester. And it really did need to be dealt with.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that the US has done some recognizing. Australia, it's your turn. We gotta get it recognized. New Zealand as well. I'm working on New Zealand. It's history, it's truth, and it's very important for Anzac Day, because Anzac Day started a day after they started collecting the intellectuals in Istanbul and taking, basically getting rid of them. And that's when the genocide started. The genocide started on April 24th. Anzac Day is known as April 25th, same year. And, as soon as they figured out that the Anzac troops are coming, they're like, okay, we need to get rid of this minority. They might,
join up.
This is the perfect. They might, but also I think this is the perfect cloak of war. There's war. This is the perfect time to, get rid of our internal.
That's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You ever look back and reflect and think, you have an impact far greater making that decision to pursue music than had you been a businessman, a jeweler, or a lawyer?
Absolutely. I kind of had to go to the far reaches of who I shouldn't be to make myself realize who I should be as a young person. Because the young people, I mean, you go to college and some people know exactly what they want to do, right, for the rest of their lives, but most kids don't. Like they need to learn different things so that if something, captures them, then they can follow it, and for me, I was looking for my vision. And it took me a while to realize it. Unlike the guys in my band who've been playing music since they were like 8 or 7,
So they were like straight in, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you don't really strike me as the type of guy that's kind of half-assed about things. You're very, once you set your mind on something, you just chase it, I guess you just thought that maybe this was my avenue, but then you realize, no, this is not. And then it was like total abandon, just go straight into music, So you didn't really lose too much time. It was more, there's more fervency there to pursue the music after you realize that.
That's very true. And that's, you explained it correctly, Ben. It's in the film that, once I made that switch, I was completely dedicated. But it's also, you can't regret experiences, like things happen for a reason in your life. And everything that I experienced until I completely started dedicating myself to music is very important in who I am today. Whether it's what I do with my music, or it's how I treat people, it's how, it taught me a lot in life. All those interactions I would not replace. Someone said if you were able to go back in time, like Back to the Future, back to the past and basically give your 20-year-old self advice, what would you say? I'd say nothing. You know, you
Yeah,
don't.
no, that's very wise.
Yeah,
That's very wise. I think life is meant to be, you know, wherever you're at, that's where you're at. And yeah. Um, you also reminded me a lot of, let's just kind of bringing it back to the Beatles here again with John Lennon. He was a very sort of outspoken, sort of truth serum guy as well, particularly when he was disbanding from the Beatles and going solo. He had the bed-in protest in Amsterdam,
that's right.
and was very, very outspoken and sort of aggravated a few people. And a lot of people didn't like that.
Yeah.
But it's proven over time that a lot of people now respect him for speaking out. And has he ever sort of had an influence on your creativity or just encouragement as an artist?
Huge. I mean, John Lennon and the Beatles have had a huge, you know, they're one of the biggest bands on the planet. And, you know, kids today are still buying more Beatles records than any other record. Like, you know, I mean, that's how big they are. They're just permanently huge in that sense. But yeah, John Lennon's, you know, in his political activism was very important, I think. But also his envisioning, like what, you know how he had that big billboard that said war is over, right?
Yeah.
While Vietnam was going on. And he was trying to basically say that if we collectively envision a different future, it's ours to have. But if we don't, then that's on us. We're pathetic in that sense, right? So I think envisioning is very important in life, and he knew that. He got that. So
Yeah.
that's a
He's
good lesson.
projecting something that might not have been there, but just turning people onto it, an idea or a concept that they might not have considered before.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the true sense of a Morrison or a Dylan or even a John Lennon, you're basically a poet with a harder sound behind it.
Yeah, you could say that. You know, I was an activist before becoming an artist. I was a poet before becoming a singer or a songwriter. So, and yeah, I think, you know, and I was influenced by Morrison and you know, Lennon and as well as, you know, other you know, you know, poets and writers, and you know, but it was also a time in my life. It's interesting because you look back. It was also a time in my life where I was seeing things poetically. You know, you don't get that privilege your whole life. I think I still try to get into that mind frame of seeing things poetically, and
What do you
sometimes
mean? What do you mean by that? Like, how do you mean that?
an artist's eye for writing. You know, an
Yeah.
artist's eye for writing. So you see, you know, you might see a color coming in and you'll describe that as strawberry through the window, right?
Okay.
I'm just throwing
Yeah.
something out there, right? Strawberry
Yeah.
through the glass, whatever. But as your left brain gets really more, you know, older and you start thinking more and stuff, I feel like over time I've become less of a poet and more of a composer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and and it is what it is, you know.
It's a season that you're going through at that time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned composing. I think it's fascinating that every time you release a solo album, it's only you. You're doing the drums. You're doing you're producing it. You're doing from top to bottom. It is an imprint of you.
It's
tell
all
us a little.
Serge.
Tell us a little bit about Elasticity and what's about to come out in March.
Sure, I will. To clarify, majority of what I'm performing is me, but there's also, you know, what I generally with Elasticity, we actually didn't get live drums, but in Elect the Dead and, you know, some of the other solo records, I've gotten live ensembles to re-record a lot of the stuff that I've written. So I like to write. I'll keep a lot of my recordings that make sense, but if something is going to sound better live, I'll bring in a better bass player, a better guitarist, and plenty of those, and an orchestra, for example, with my second solo record, Imperfect Harmonies. So, but with Elasticity, it's pretty much mostly done in the box, and I got some help from Dan Monty, who's my guitarist from the FCC and a good friend of mine. He's also an engineer and mixer and works with, you know, Metallica and all sorts of bands with Rick Rubin and stuff like that, which is great. And so he was able to add some guitars and replace, you know, some of my bass, probably, I'm guessing. I mean, and did some drum programming. I did the rest of the drum programming. So he's done some work on it and helped me mix it. But there's not a lot of people. It's not like a band thing where you're playing. And it's kind of recorded when on my solo projects, as far as, rock stuff, it's ass backwards recording, which I describe, normal recording is you track the drums, then you do overdubs for guitars, bass, keyboards, vocals, etc. Whereas the way I do it is I record everything myself, and then I replace the drums, and
That's good. It's a good method.
And then if I need to replace guitars, I'll replace. It's kind of ass backwards, but it works. It works because if you're working on it yourself and you don't, I remember Elected Dead, the record when we were doing it, the song "Sky Is Over." We did live drums on "Sky Is Over," but the programming sounded better, so I just didn't use the live drums. Gives you an option as well, which is cool.
What when it comes to Elasticity, you initially had sought out to make another album with System of a Down, but yet somewhere along the line you decided to turn this into a solo album. Why make that conscientious decision?
When the songs on Elasticity were written 5-6 years ago, and at one point when in 2015-16 there was a protest in Armenia called Electric Yerevan protest, and that inspired me to write the song Electric Yerevan. When that song came to me, I said, man, this sounds like System. Like, it's very System-esque. It's very Dead Kennedys, very punky, with the middle part very much like Iron Maiden, if you will. So I'm like, wow, this is very much kind of that vibe. I wonder if I were to write System songs right now, what they would sound like. So I kind of opened that door in my mind, and these rock songs started coming. And then we tried to make it work with the band, and we just couldn't see eye to eye in both philosophically going forward, direction-wise, and creatively as well, and sharing of responsibilities, all of that. And we've discussed that in the press back and forth between Darren, John, Chavo, and myself, so I'm not going to go there. But at that point, I was like, okay, I want to finish these songs the way I had envisioned because they're good songs. I did, and here they are. And I really think it's a really diverse, interesting EP with a lot of syncopated, arpeggiated synths going along with the typical 4-piece kind of, rock sound. And, both the hard rock stuff's there as well as the really interesting, dynamic, beautiful, kind of otherworldly sounds within the EP. So I'm quite content.
Yeah, I heard the first song on the EP, and it blew me away. And it almost reminded me of Collective Soul, like Shine, Haven't Let Your Light Shine Down. Have you heard that track before, or is that?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, no, brilliant, mate. And Rumi, is that how you pronounce it? Rumi?
Yeah.
Reminded me of Beautiful Boy, again, John Lennon. About his son, and life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. It's like a message to him in the future, almost, to draw back on.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah. And that's, to me, that's just as powerful as any political statement, really. Not to say that it's either or, but the imagery and the power behind that is just as powerful in a way.
Absolutely, Ben. And I agree that I've said this numerous times that a good love song can change the world way more than a political song sometimes, So nice, and I do remember that song, Lennon song, and the message as well. Yeah.
Well, Serge, before we let you go, was that a Synchronicity t-shirt we saw in the doc?
Yes. Okay, so I don't know how old I was. I was probably like 19, 20, 21. I can't even, I don't know, but I was pretty young, and I loved the Police. And years later, now I'm friends with Stuart Copeland. We've jammed together numerous times for his Sacred Grove, YouTube page and stuff. And it's like such a dream come true in that sense. So I hadn't even thought about it till I saw the documentary and saw that picture of the Synchronicity t-shirt, and I'm like, oh, wow,
Oh, all right, that's awesome. Well, Serge, thank you so much for joining us. Serj Tankian, System of a Down, Truth to Power documentary out February 19th. Serge, absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
It's an honor, mate.
Thanks, Doug.